Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Currently Speaking, the podcast of the Current Consulting Group. And as always, this is Bill Current, president and founder of the Current Consulting Group. If you'd like to listen to past episodes of Currently Speaking, go to our website at currentconsultinggroup.com or look at our YouTube channel. And also, you can find Currently Speaking on all the major podcast platforms as well. So if you'd like to look at some past episodes or listen to them while you're working out or where you're at your desk working and whatnot, you can find them at those various sources. Again, currentconsultinggroup.com. You'll find an archive of not only past episodes of Currently Speaking of our podcast, but you'll also find past webinars that we've done, blog posts and articles you can find there. A lot of good information. So feel free to go there, visit it, and share that information with others. We're still building up our viewership for the podcast, and so any help you can give us, we would very much appreciate it. Now, I've titled today's episode, Legalizing Marijuana. Is it time to acknowledge reality and change course? And I'm going to start out by asking this question. Was President Trump duped into his decision to reclassify marijuana from a Schedule I drug, where we find other dangerous drugs like cocaine and heroin, to a Schedule III drug, where Tylenol with codeine resides, thus making it more available to the masses by removing crucial federal safeguards? To help answer that question, consider the following public statement that just came out very recently. Quote, "The unfortunate truth is that the loosening of marijuana policies, especially the decision to legalize pot without adequately regulating it, has led to worse outcomes than many Americans expected. It is time to acknowledge reality and change course." Wow, that's a powerful statement, especially at a time when the President of the United States has all but given his blessing to a move that may eventually lead to the federal legalization of pot. Talk about speaking truth to power. And we would expect such a statement to come from organizations like Americans Against Legalizing Marijuana or Smart Approaches to Marijuana, or even from Alex Berenson, author of the landmark book, Tell Your Children, The Truth About Marijuana, Mental Illness, and Violence. But this particular quote is actually from an unlikely source, the editorial board at the New York Times. On February 9th, 2026, the Times published an article entitled, "It's Time for America to Admit That It Has a Marijuana Problem." Now, as the saying goes, better late than never. I mean, the Times deserves credit here, especially given the fact its editorial board has historically been one of the loudest voices in favor of marijuana legalization. A 6-part series published in 2014 by the Times compared the federal ban on marijuana to alcohol prohibition, essentially singing marijuana's praises and advocating for its legalization. Now the Times editorial board admits that while much of what they wrote has withstood the test of time, an opinion, by the way, not shared by everyone, I'll say, not all of what they wrote back then has stood up. Reflecting on what they wrote with more than 10 years of hindsight, the Times now admits, quote, "At the time, supporters of legalization predicted that it would bring few downsides. In our editorials, we describe marijuana addiction and dependence as relatively minor problems. Many advocates went further and claimed that marijuana was a harmless drug that might even bring net health benefits. They also said that legalization might not lead to greater use. It is now clear," this is the Times again continuing with their editorial, "it is now clear that many of these predictions were wrong. Legalization has led to much more use. Surveys suggest that about 18 million people in the United States have used marijuana almost daily, or about 5 times a week in recent years. That was up from around 6 million in 2012 and less than 1 million in 1992. More Americans now use marijuana daily than alcohol," end quote. Now, the wider use of marijuana has resulted in many problems that are now becoming undeniable, despite the ever-growing and ever more powerful cannabis industry, referred to in the Times editorial as, quote-unquote, big weed, not to be mistaken with big pharma or big ag or any of the other big industrial machines. It is worth pausing for a moment to highlight this interesting fact. According to a report from New Frontier Data, the illicit sale of marijuana, the black market, still far outpaces legal sales. In 2022, illicit cannabis sales soared to over $74 billion, surpassing the legal market's $28 billion by a remarkable 164%. This revelation shatters the false claim by some that the legalization of marijuana will eliminate weed's black market. Now, how harmful is marijuana? Marijuana and the negative consequences of its use are becoming obvious even to ardent supporters of legalization like the New York Times. According to the Times article, which is really well worth checking out for the details, marijuana today is used by more people overall than before legalization, is used on a daily or near daily basis by more people than ever, can be highly addictive, is more potent than in years and decades past, is available in a wide variety of delivery methods, from joints and bongs to vaping and all kinds of edibles, is hard on performance and memory, is subject to misleading advertising from cannabis sellers, is a detriment to stable employment, is less regulated than alcohol and tobacco, and is not a medical miracle drug. In fact, it turns out marijuana can be very harmful, especially to frequent users' health. Now, these are all points that were made in the New York Times editorial. So let's go back to that Times article. Quote, "This wider use has caused a rise in addiction and other problems. Each year, nearly 2.8 million people in the United States suffer from cannabinoid hyperemesis syndrome, which causes severe vomiting and stomach pain. More people have also ended up in hospitals with marijuana-linked paranoia and chronic psychotic disorders. Bystanders have also been hurt, including by people driving under the influence of pot." End quote. Now, to help put the marijuana-impaired driving crisis into its proper perspective, a recent report out of Ohio found that more than 40% of 246 drivers killed in motor vehicle crashes between January 2019 and September 2024 tested positive for delta-9 tetrahydrocannabinol, THC, the active and impairing ingredient in marijuana. The report also found that the average THC level in motor vehicle fatal crash victims was 30.7 nanograms per milliliter, well above the level that would typically cause impairment. So how should employers react to the Times editorial, to all of this information and this sort of about face that the Times editorial staff has taken? I would suggest with alarm, concern, and action, especially when they learn that marijuana use can negatively affect performance and memory, two vital characteristics of a good employee, and that marijuana-impaired drivers are causing harm to others. According to the 2025 Quest Diagnostics Drug Testing Index, DTI, which is an analysis of more than 8 million drug test results from 2024, marijuana positivity for the general workforce from urine tests only was 4.5%, far outpacing amphetamines, which was second at 1.7%. And again, it is worth noting that marijuana positivity is higher in states that have legalized recreational and/or medical marijuana use. According to Quest 2023 DTI, quote, "Marijuana positivity increased 11.8% in states in which recreational marijuana is legal and 8.3% in states in which medical marijuana is legal. In states in which neither recreational nor medical marijuana is legal, marijuana positivity increased only 3.3% year over year." In Current Consulting Group's 9th annual employer drug testing survey in 2025, 78% of respondents indicated that promoting workplace safety is their top reason for conducting drug testing. And it should be, considering that according to Quest DTI, marijuana positivity following workplace accidents remained high at 7.3% in 2024, just slightly below the record high of 7.5% established in 2023. Now, the New York Times would never be mistaken for even casual fans of President Trump and his policies. For them to take a clear swipe at him while disparaging one of their historically favorite pet projects, marijuana legalization, says a lot about the nature of the Times editorial itself as well as the paper's commitment to accurate reporting when it comes to this issue. It can be hard to admit when you've made a mistake, but the old gray lady appears to have taken a big step in that direction, at least according to headlines from other news outlets reporting on the Times article. For example, from Fox News, quote, New York Times walks back stance on marijuana legalization, admits loosening of policies has made country worse off. Or from CBS 4 News, quote, New York Times reverses on pot, admits legalization brought worse outcomes. Or from Mediaite, quote, time to acknowledge reality. The New York Times warns America has a marijuana problem. Now, while the Times editorial board still claims that marijuana is safer than alcohol and tobacco in some ways, and that America should not go back to prohibition, those are quotes from the editorial, they concluded that, quote, much as the United States previously went too far in banning pot, it has recently gone too far in accepting and even promoting its use. So in conclusion, for employers concerned about safety, productivity, and turning a profit, taking a firm stand on marijuana feels like a no-brainer. Employers in every state still have the right to prohibit workers from bringing marijuana into the workplace, using marijuana while on the job, and being at work while under the influence of or impaired by marijuana, especially for those who perform safety-sensitive duties. And even though some states that have legalized marijuana have also placed restrictions on what employers can do with a positive marijuana drug test, screening individuals for marijuana in accordance with applicable laws seems like a prudent thing to do, especially given the spread of marijuana legalization, the well-documented harmful and impairing effects of marijuana use, and the fact that more people are using marijuana. Conducting drug tests that include marijuana has probably never been more important. When it comes to legalizing marijuana, the New York Times makes a good point. It is time to acknowledge reality and change course. Well, thank you for joining us for another episode of Currently Speaking. We'll be back in another week or so with another episode. Check us out on our YouTube channel, on all the major podcast platforms, or just go to currentconsultinggroup.com where you'll find an archive of past episodes of Currently Speaking. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you again soon.